Ava Martinez clutched her worn gym bag as she approached the steel doors of Blackwater Combat Academy. The morning Virginia air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding woods. She'd driven 3 hours from her small hometown, leaving before dawn to make the 8 a.m. orientation. The building looked more like a fortress than a training facility, concrete walls, minimal windows, and the kind of intimidating presence that made most people turn around. But Ava wasn't most people, even if she looked like she belonged in a coffee shop rather than a combat zone. At 5'4", with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she wore a plain grey hoodie and black sweatpants. No brand names, no tactical gear, nothing that screamed fighter. Her sneakers were clean but old, the kind you'd see on someone heading to the grocery store, not someone pursuing elite personal security certification. Inside, the lobby buzzed with testosterone and bravado. Men in their 20s and 30s, most sporting military haircuts and expensive workout gear, clustered in groups comparing credentials. She heard fragments of conversation, special forces training, private military contracts, law enforcement backgrounds. Next, barked a voice from behind a steel desk. Ava approached quietly, sliding her folder across to a woman with sergeant stripes tattooed on her forearm. "Ava Martinez," she said simply, her voice calm and clear. The woman flipped through the paperwork without looking up. "Says here you're applying for Level 5 Personal Protection Certification. That's our most advanced program." She finally raised, her eyes taking in Ava's appearance with barely concealed skepticism. "You sure you're in the right place, honey? We've got a women's self-defense class that meets Tuesday evenings. I'm in the right place." Something in Ava's tone made the woman pause, but she just shrugged and stamped the forms. "Instructor Collins will be with the group in 5 minutes. Don't say I didn't warn you." Ava found a spot along the back wall of the main training floor, setting her bag down quietly. The space was massive, high ceilings, rubber flooring, heavy bags hanging like silent sentinels. The smell of sweat and determination hung heavy in the air. "Look what we got here," someone snickered behind her. She turned to see 2 men in their late 20s, both built like they lived in the gym. The taller one, with arms covered in military tattoos, grinned at his companion. "I'm betting she's lost," said the second man, adjusting his tactical vest. "Yoga studios across the street, lady." Ava didn't respond, just turned back to face the front, but she felt their eyes on her, heard the quiet laughter spreading through the group. 32 applicants, and she was the only woman. The math wasn't lost on her. "Listen up," the voice cut through the chatter like a blade. Instructor Collins entered the room with the bearing of a man who'd spent decades breaking people down and building them back up. 6 feet tall, grey hair. Buzzed military short, with scars on his knuckles that told stories. His eyes swept the room like a predator, sizing up prey. "Welcome to Blackwater Combat Academy. Look around. In 4 weeks, half of you will be gone. By graduation, maybe 10 of you will earn certification." His gaze lingered on Ava for a moment longer than necessary. "This isn't a game. This isn't a hobby. This is preparation for situations where hesitation means death, yours or your client's." He began pacing, his boots echoing against the rubber floor. Personal protection isn't about looking tough. It's about being invisible until you need to be a weapon. It's about reading situations, managing crowds, and yes, when everything else fails, neutralizing threats with precision and control. Ava felt the weight of stares from her fellow applicants. She'd expected this. What she hadn't expected was the subtle shift in Collins's expression when he looked at her. Not quite dismissal, but close enough. We'll start with basics, Collins continued. Situational awareness, threat assessment, defensive positioning. But first, I want to see what you're working with. He gestured toward a corner where heavy bags waited. Partner up. Show me what you think you know. The pairing happened naturally. Military guys with military guys, law enforcement with law enforcement. Ava stood alone until Collins pointed at Derek Thompson, the largest man in the room. 6'5", 260 pounds of muscle earned through years of college football and military service. Martinez, you're with Thompson. Derek looked down at her with what might have been pity. You sure about this, instructor? I don't want to hurt anyone. Collins's smile was thin and sharp. Don't worry about her, Thompson. Worry about yourself. As they walked toward the bags, Ava heard the whispers starting again. But something else caught her attention. Collins was watching her with the intensity of someone who knew more than he was letting on. There was calculation in his eyes, like he was setting up pieces on a chessboard. She'd seen that look before, years ago, in a different life. It was the look of someone preparing a test that had nothing to do with heavy bags or basic techniques. The real question was, what was he really testing, and why had he chosen her? All right, Martinez, Derek said, rolling his shoulders as they approached the heavy bag. How about you go first? I'll take it easy on the bag after you. Ava nodded, pulling her hair back tighter. Around them, the sound of fists hitting leather filled the air as other pairs began their warm-up drills. She noticed Collins' positioning, himself where he could watch her clearly, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She took her stance, balanced, grounded, nothing flashy. Her first punch landed with a solid thud that turned a few heads. The second came faster, more precise. By the third combination, she had Derek's full attention. Damn, he muttered, his condescending tone replaced by surprise. Where'd you learn to hit like that? Around, Ava replied, stepping back to let him take his turn. Derek unleashed a series of powerful strikes that made the bag dance on its chain. Raw power, obvious strength, but Ava noticed something else. He was all offense, no subtlety. Every movement telegraphed, every technique focused on overwhelming force. Time, Collins barked. Circle up. As they gathered, Ava caught fragments of whispered conversations around her. Did you see her technique? Maybe she's not completely hopeless. Still doesn't change the fact she's half the size of everyone here. Collins addressed the group. What I saw tells me some of you have training, others have watched too many movies. Over the next 4 weeks, I'll separate the wheat from the chaff. His eyes found Ava again. Some of you might surprise me, others will surprise themselves, unfortunately. That afternoon, during the lunch break, Ava sat alone at a corner table in the academy's small cafeteria. She'd brought a simple sandwich from home, while most others ordered from the grill. The conversations around her buzzed with military stories and chest-thumping about past experiences. Mind if I sit? She looked up to see Marcus Webb, one of the few applicants who hadn't joined in the morning's commentary about her presence. Mid-30s, average build, with observant eyes and a quiet demeanor that reminded her of herself. Sure. Marcus settled across from her, unwrapping a turkey sandwich. Former army? He asked casually. No. Police? No. He nodded, chewing thoughtfully. But you've trained somewhere. That wasn't beginner's technique on the bag. Ava studied him for a moment. You? Military police, 2 tours overseas, civilian security for the past 5 years. He glanced around the room. Most of these guys are here because they think this job is about intimidation and muscle. You're here for a different reason. It wasn't a question, and Ava didn't treat it like one. We all have our reasons. True. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Word of advice? Collins has a reputation. He doesn't like surprises, and he especially doesn't like being wrong about first impressions. Be careful. Before Ava could respond, Derek's voice boomed across the cafeteria. Hey, Martinez! You never said where you trained. Come on, share with the class. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward her. Ava felt the familiar weight of unwanted attention, the kind that had driven her away from her old life years ago. Just some local training, she said simply. Local training? Derek grinned, playing to his audience. Must have been some gym. You hit harder than my little sister, and she's in kickboxing. Laughter rippled through the room. Not cruel, but not entirely friendly either. The kind of laughter that came from men who weren't quite sure what to make of her yet. Maybe she'll teach us some moves, called out Jake Morrison, the tattooed guy from the morning. You know, for when we need to fight someone our own size. More laughter. Ava continued eating her sandwich, her face calm, but Marcus noticed her jaw tightened slightly. That's enough. Collins's voice cut through the noise as he entered the cafeteria. Save the energy for this afternoon. We're moving to sparring drills. The laughter died quickly. Collins surveyed the room with the same calculating expression Ava had noticed earlier. Actually, he continued, his eyes settling on Ava, I think we'll start with some practical demonstrations. See how well theory translates to reality. Something in his tone made the hair on the back of Ava's neck stand up. This wasn't going to be a standard training exercise. That afternoon, Collins gathered everyone around a mat in the center of the main floor. Personal protection often comes down to one moment, the moment when talking stops and action begins. You need to be ready for that moment regardless of size, strength, or advantages your opponent might have. He gestured toward the mat. Today we'll see how well you can adapt under pressure. No choreographed drills, no predetermined techniques. Just reaction and instinct. Derek stepped forward eagerly. Who's first, instructor? Collins smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Martinez, you're up. A murmur went through the group. Ava felt every eye in the room on her as she stepped toward the mat. This wasn't random selection, this was deliberate. Thompson, you're her partner. Derek looked genuinely uncomfortable, for the first time all day. Instructor, are you sure? I outweigh her by over 100 pounds. Problem, Thompson. Threats don't come in convenient packages. Martinez signed the same waiver you did. Collins handed Ava a mouthguard, his expression neutral, but his intent clear. This wasn't training, this was a test she wasn't supposed to pass. As she fitted the mouthguard, Ava's mind went to a conversation she'd had with her father years ago, back when she was still competing. The moment someone underestimates you, daughter, you've already won half the battle. The other half is knowing exactly what to do with that advantage. She looked across the mat at Derek, who was still shaking his head with concern. Around the circle, she saw faces filled with anticipation, curiosity, and in some cases, worry for her safety. Only Collins looked like he knew exactly what was about to happen. The question was, did she? Light contact only, Collins announced, though his tone suggested he expected anything but. This is about technique and control, not power. Ava noticed. He didn't look at Derek when he said it. The circle of applicants pressed closer, forming a tight ring around the mat. The energy in the room had shifted from casual interest to electric anticipation. Some looked genuinely concerned for her safety. Others wore the expression of people expecting to witness a train wreck. Derek stepped onto the mat reluctantly, still shaking his head. Look, Ava, I'll go easy, okay? Just try to stay defensive. And begin! Collins's command cut through Derek's attempt at reassurance. For a moment,
Neither fighter moved. Derek hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation. Ava stood perfectly still, her breathing steady, eyes focused not
on Derek's hands, but on his center of gravity. "What are you waiting for, Thompson?" Collins barked. "She's not going to attack herself." The pressure in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. Derek sighed and moved forward, throwing a slow, telegraphed jab that was more gesture than attack. Ava slipped it easily, but didn't counter. The crowd murmured, some appreciating her defensive skills, others growing restless. "Faster, Thompson, she's not made of glass." Derek's next combination came quicker, with more commitment. Ava moved like water, deflecting and evading without landing a single strike in return. Her footwork was flawless, her positioning perfect, but she remained purely defensive. "What's she doing?" someone whispered. "Why isn't she fighting back?" Collins' jaw tightened. This wasn't going according to his plan. "Martinez, this isn't a dance. Show me what you've got." Ava continued her defensive movement, staying just out of Derek's range. She could feel Collins' frustration building, could sense the crowd's growing restlessness, but something told her to wait, to let this play out exactly as Collins intended.
"Stop!" Collins stepped onto the mat, his face flushed with irritation. "This is pathetic. Thompson, you're holding back like she's your grandmother. Martinez, you're acting like a victim instead of a protector." He turned to address the group. "This
is exactly what I'm talking about. Half measures and hesitation will get you killed in the real world." Derek opened his mouth to protest, but Collins cut him off. "We're going to try this again. Full contact this time. No gloves, no headgear, no safety net. You want to be professionals?
Act like it." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Marcus stepped forward. "Instructor, with respect, that's not standard protocol for Day 2 training." Collins whirled on him. "Did I ask for your opinion, Webb? Anyone else have concerns about my training methods?" The silence stretched.
Ava felt the weight of 31 pairs of eyes on her, waiting to see if she would back down, if she would ask for an exception, if she would prove that she didn't belong. Instead, she spit out her mouthguard and looked directly at Collins. "I'm ready." His smile was sharp and satisfied. "Now we're getting somewhere." Derek looked genuinely distressed.
"Instructor, I can't." "You can, and you will, Thompson, unless you want to explain to everyone why you're not tough enough to handle a simple training exercise." The manipulation was obvious but effective. Derek's face reddened, caught between his conscience and his pride in front of his peers.
Collins handed Derek a mouthguard of his own. "Full contact means full contact. Show me what happens when the stakes are real." As Derek fitted his mouthguard, Ava caught Marcus's eye. He shook his head slightly, a warning she acknowledged with the barest nod. She understood the game now. Collins wanted to make an example of her, to prove that some people simply didn't belong in his world. What he didn't understand was that she'd been ready for this moment since she walked through the door. Maybe since long before that. Fighters ready? Collins positioned himself at the edge of the mat, close enough to interfere if he chose to, far enough away to claim innocence if things went wrong. Derek reluctantly raised his hands. Ava settled
into her stance, lower than before, more grounded, with a stillness that seemed to change the very air around her. "Begin." This time, Derek came forward with real intent, his hesitation finally overcome by Collins' pressure and the weight of peer
judgment. His first punch carried real power, aimed at her head with the kind of force that could end the fight immediately. Ava moved, not the flowing evasion of moments before, but something different, something that made the crowd collectively hold its breath. She slipped inside Derek's punch, her movement so sudden and precise that he couldn't adjust. Her left hand deflected his arm while her right found its target, a perfect palm strike to his chin that traveled less than 6 inches but carried the accumulated power of years of training and a lifetime of being underestimated. The sound was like a baseball bat hitting a melon. Derek's eyes rolled back as his legs buckled. All 260 pounds of him crashed to the mat like a falling tree, his body going completely limp before he hit the ground. Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Ava stood over Derek's unconscious form, her breathing steady, her expression unchanged. She looked around the circle of shocked faces, then directly at Collins. "Is that what you wanted to see?" Collins stared at Derek's motionless body, his carefully laid plan having backfired spectacularly. Several applicants were already kneeling beside Derek, checking his pulse, trying to wake him up. "What the hell was that?" Jake Morrison demanded, his voice shaky. "That," said Marcus quietly, "was precision." Collins found his voice, though it came out strained. "Martinez, where exactly did you say you trained?" Ava picked up her water bottle and towel, her movements calm and deliberate. "I didn't." She walked toward the locker room, leaving behind a room full of men who would never look at her the same way again, and an instructor whose authority had just been shattered by a woman who hit like lightning and disappeared like mist. Behind her, Derek was finally stirring, groaning as consciousness returned. The first words out of his mouth would be, "What happened?" The answer was simple. Ava Martinez had just announced that she was exactly where she belonged. Derek came to 3 minutes later with a headache and a bruised ego that would last much longer. As Marcus and Jake helped him sit up, Collins gathered the group for what he called a tactical review, though everyone knew it was damage control. "What we witnessed demonstrates the importance of never underestimating an opponent," Collins began, his usual commanding presence noticeably shaken. Martinez's technique was effective. "Effective?" Derek rubbed his jaw, wincing. "She dropped me like a sack of potatoes with one hit." "That wasn't beginner's luck." Collins shot him a sharp look. "No, it wasn't." While the group discussed what they'd witnessed, Ava sat in the empty locker room, finally allowing herself a moment to breathe. She'd hoped to avoid this, the attention, the questions, the inevitable scrutiny that came with revealing even a fraction of what she was capable of. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "How's the first day going, sweetheart?" She stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Complicated." 20 minutes later, she emerged to find Marcus waiting in the hallway. The building had quieted. Most applicants had left for the day, shaken by what they'd witnessed. "Collins wants to see you," Marcus said. "His office?" Ava nodded, unsurprised. She followed Marcus down a corridor lined with photos of previous graduating classes, serious-faced men and women in tactical gear, the elite few who'd made it through Blackwater's program. Collins's office was sparse and functional, steel desk, filing cabinets, and a wall covered with military commendations and training certificates. He sat behind his desk, studying a folder that Ava recognized as her application. "Sit." She took the chair across from him, noting that he'd positioned himself with his back to the wall and clear sight lines to both the door and window. Old habit, from someone who'd spent time in dangerous places. "Ava Martinez," he began, reading from her file. Age 28. Previous occupation listed as administrative assistant. No military background, no law enforcement experience, No martial arts certifications listed. He looked up. Want to explain how an administrative assistant just knocked out a former Army Ranger with one punch? Clean living? Collins wasn't amused. I've been training fighters for 15 years, Martinez. I've seen every kind of technique, every style, every trick. What you did out there wasn't something you picked up at a weekend seminar. Ava remained silent, letting him work through his frustration. So I made some calls, Collins continued. Turns out there's a Martinez family dojo in rural Virginia, run by Robert Martinez, former Army Special Forces, and his wife Elena Martinez, who won 3 national judo championships in the 80s. He leaned forward. Their daughter Ava was a prodigy. Started competing at 12, won her first national title at 16. By 18, she was being recruited by Olympic teams and professional fighting organizations. Then she just disappeared. Ava felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with having her past dragged into the light. The Martinez family dojo is about to be demolished, Collins continued. Property taxes owed, city development project. Estimated cost to save it? About $50,000. He closed the folder. Exactly what our Level 5 certification program costs, and exactly what graduates can expect to earn in their first year. The silence stretched between them. Outside, she could hear the sounds of evening training, other classes, other students, pursuing their own goals without the weight of family legacy and financial desperation. Why hide it? Collins asked, his tone softer now. Why not just tell the truth from the beginning? Because, Ava said quietly, I walked away from that life for a reason. I didn't want to be defined by what I used to be. And what was that? Angry. Collins studied her face, seeing something there that made him reconsider his assumptions. And now? Now I'm just trying to save my family's legacy without becoming something I swore I'd never be again. The admission hung in the air between them. Collins leaned back in his chair, processing this new information. You could have ended that fight in the first 30 seconds, he said. Instead, you let Thompson think he had a chance. Let me push the situation until I looked like the bad guy, then demonstrated exactly why underestimating you was a mistake. I was trying to avoid exactly this conversation. Too late for that. Collins opened a drawer and pulled out a different folder, thicker, marked with official seals. This program isn't just about personal protection certification. We also recruit for specialized government contracts, the kind that require people who can blend in anywhere, handle themselves in any situation, and make problems disappear quietly. He slid the folder across to her. The kind of work that pays considerably more than $50,000 a year. Ava didn't touch the folder. I'm not interested in going back to that world. What if that world is the only way to save your family's dojo? The question hit exactly where he intended it to. Ava looked at the folder, then back at Collins. What are you offering? Finish the program. Demonstrate your full capabilities. Accept a 1-year contract with my government contacts. He paused. In return, I personally guarantee your family's dojo stays open, taxes paid, with enough left over for renovations. And if I refuse, Collins' expression hardened slightly, then you'll finish the program like everyone else, earn your standard certification, and hope $50,000 is enough to save your family's legacy. Ava understood the implicit threat. Collins now knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. That information could be used to help her or destroy her, depending on her cooperation. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. But Martinez, Collins's voice stopped her as she reached the door. That demonstration today? That was you holding back. I can tell. Next time someone underestimates you, maybe don't give them the courtesy. As Ava walked to her car, She felt the weight of 30 years of decisions settling on her shoulders. She'd spent a decade trying to escape her past, building a quiet life away from violence and competition. Now that past was the only thing that might save her family's future. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from her father. "Whatever happens, we're proud of you." He had no idea how much she was about to risk to make sure those words stayed true. The counter-strategy. Ava arrived at the academy the next morning 30 minutes early, as was her habit. The parking lot was empty except for Collins's truck and a black sedan with government plates that hadn't been there the day before. She found Collins in his office with two visitors, a woman in a sharp business suit and a man whose bearing screamed federal agent even in civilian clothes. They looked up as she entered, and she felt the familiar sensation of being evaluated by people who made careers out of reading others. "Martinez," Collins said, "this is Agent Sarah Chen from a department that doesn't officially exist, and Director Michael Ross from a program that definitely doesn't exist." Agent Chen stepped forward, extending her hand. "We've heard interesting things about you, Ms. Martinez." "All good, I hope." "Depends on your perspective," Director Ross replied. His smile was polite, but calculating. "We understand you're considering some specialized opportunities." Ava looked between the three of them, recognizing a coordinated pitch when she saw one. "I haven't decided anything yet." "Of course," Chen said smoothly. "But while you're deciding, perhaps you'd be interested in knowing more about what we do." She opened a tablet and showed Ava a series of photos. Diplomatic events, corporate boardrooms, high-profile individuals surrounded by discreet security teams. "Personal protection for people whose safety affects national interests," Chen explained. "Ambassadors, defense contractors, foreign dignitaries, the kind of work where blending in is as important as tactical capability." Ross leaned forward. "The kind of work where someone with your unique background would be invaluable, and the kind of work," Collins added, "that comes with compensation packages starting at $200,000 annually." The number hit like a physical blow. Ava kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced. That was 4 times what she'd hoped to earn, enough to save the dojo and secure her family's future for years. "What would you need from me?" she asked carefully. "Complete the Blackwater program with full demonstration of capabilities," Chen replied. "Then 1 year of contract work. After that, you're free to pursue whatever path you choose, with enough financial security to make any choice you want," Ross added. Before Ava could respond, voices in the hallway announced the arrival of other applicants. Chen and Ross gathered their materials quickly. "Think it over," Chen said, handing Ava a business card with only a phone number. "But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait." After they left, Colin studied Ava's face. "Questions? Just one. Was yesterday's setup part of this recruitment or just happy coincidence?" Collins's smile was thin. "Does it matter? Either way, you handled it exactly like someone they'd want to hire." The morning training session was subdued. Word of Ava's performance had spread, and she noticed the careful distance her fellow applicants maintained. Not hostile, but respectful in the way people respected dangerous things they didn't fully understand. Derek approached her during the break, his jaw still slightly swollen. "No hard feelings," he said, extending his hand. That was the cleanest
knockout I've ever been on the wrong end of. "Thank you. Mind if I ask you something?" He glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard.
Collins set that up, didn't he? The whole no gloves, full contact thing? Ava nodded. Figured. Man's got a reputation for testing people in creative ways. Derek lowered his voice. Word of advice? Whatever he's offering you, make sure you understand. The full price. Collins doesn't do anything without multiple angles. That afternoon, Ava called her father from her car during lunch break. "How much trouble are we really in, Dad?" A pause. "More than I wanted to burden you with, sweetheart." The tax assessment came back higher than expected. "Even if we scrape together the money, we'll need major repairs to meet current safety codes." "How much for everything, honestly?" "Close to 100,000, but Ava, I don't want you sacrificing your future for—" "What if I told you I might have found a way?" Another pause, longer this time. "I'd say be careful of solutions that seem too good to be true." "I love you too, Dad." That evening, Ava drove to a small park outside town and called the number on Chen's card. The agent answered on the first ring. "I'm interested," Ava said, without preamble, "but I have conditions. I'm listening. First, the payment for my family's situation goes through immediately upon program completion, not after the contract year." Agreed. "Second, I want full disclosure about what kind of assignments I'd be taking. No surprises, no mission creep. Within security clearance limitations, yes. Third, after the year is up, we're done. No extensions, no follow-up contracts, no calls for special favors." Chen was quiet for a moment. "You don't trust us." "I don't trust anyone who makes my problems disappear too easily. People who can give you everything can take it away just as fast." "Fair enough. Anything else?" Ava watched a family walking their dog in the distance, normal people living normal lives without having to choose between their principles and their family's survival. "Yeah, I want it in writing that my family is off limits. Whatever this contract involves, it doesn't touch them." "Done. We'll have paperwork ready by Friday." After ending the call, Ava sat in her car as darkness settled around the park. She'd just committed to a year of her life doing work she'd sworn to never do again with people she didn't trust for money that would solve all her family's problems. It felt exactly like the kind of devil's bargain that had driven her away from fighting in the first place. But this time, she wasn't fighting for her own glory or to prove anything to anyone. This time, she was fighting for something bigger than herself. That had to count for something. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Heard Collins had visitors today. "Everything okay?" she typed back. "Just another day at the office." But as she drove home, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just set events in motion that would change everything, and that Collins, Chen, and Ross had been counting
On exactly that.
the test. Friday morning brought the paperwork Chen had promised, 12 pages of legal language that essentially boiled down to 1 year of Ava's life in exchange for her family's financial security. She signed it in Collins' office with Chen and Ross as witnesses, noting how quickly they'd produced documents that should have taken days to process. "Congratulations," Chen said, shaking her hand. "You're now officially a consultant in training for Strategic Protection Services." Catchy name. "We like to keep things simple." Ross handed her a different folder. "Your first assignment details." "Nothing complex, just a weekend corporate retreat that needs discreet security oversight." Ava opened the folder and immediately understood why they'd been so eager to recruit her. The client was Harrison Industries, the same real estate development company that had been pressuring her family to sell their property.
"Interesting coincidence," she said carefully. Collins leaned back in his chair. "No such thing as coincidences in this business, Martinez. Just opportunities." The pieces clicked together with startling clarity. Harrison Industries wasn't just any
client. They were the reason she needed money in the first place. Now she was being paid to protect the same executives who were trying to destroy her family's legacy. "Problem?" Chen asked, noting Ava's expression. just appreciating the irony. "Irony is what makes this job interesting," Ross replied. "Can you handle it professionally?" It was a test within a test. They wanted to see if she could separate personal feelings from professional obligations, if she could be trusted to protect people she had every reason to hate. "When do I start?" "Tonight. The retreat is at Harrison's private lodge in the Blue Ridge Mountains. You'll be part of a 3-person security team, but your role is primary close protection for CEO Richard Harrison himself." Ava had never met Harrison, but she'd seen his picture in the local newspaper whenever another family business was forced to sell to his development projects. Mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of confident smile that came from never having to worry about money. "What kind of threats are we expecting?" "Probably none," Chen admitted. "This is more about presence and preparedness." Harrison has been receiving some angry letters about his latest development project. Nothing actionable, but enough to make him nervous. "The Riverside Commons project." Ross nodded. "You familiar with it?" "You could say that." That afternoon, Ava drove into the mountains with mixed feelings. The retreat lodge was exactly what she'd expected. Rustic luxury, the kind of place where millionaires could pretend to rough it while enjoying 5-star amenities. She met her team in the security briefing room. Tom Bradley, a former Secret Service agent who would handle perimeter security, and Lisa Park, ex-military police, who would manage communications and logistics. Both were professional, competent, and clearly curious about the new addition to their team. "So you're the one Collins has been talking about," Bradley said during introductions. "Heard you made quite an impression. Word travels fast. In this business, reputations are everything." Park handed her an earpiece and radio. "Primary protection means you stay within 10 feet of Harrison all times. He's friendly, likes to chat, but don't let that fool you. The man's sharp as a razor and twice as cutting when he wants to be." The retreat participants began arriving. At 6 p.m., a dozen executives and their families here for what Harrison called a strategic planning weekend. Ava positioned herself near the main entrance, watching faces and cataloging details with the automatic precision of someone trained to spot trouble before it started. Richard Harrison emerged from a black Mercedes, and Ava got her first close look at the man who'd been trying to destroy her family's life. He was smaller than his photos suggested, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who owned everything he could see. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced, and his eyes never stopped moving, constantly assessing, calculating, looking for angles. "You must be my new shadow," he said, approaching Ava with that trademark smile. "Richard Harrison. I understand you come highly recommended, Ava Martinez. I'll do my best to stay out of your way while keeping you safe." "Martinez." Harrison paused, his expression shifting slightly. "That name sounds familiar. You wouldn't happen to be related to the Martinez family that runs that little dojo in Riverside, would you?" Ava felt every muscle in her body tense, but kept her voice level. "Small world." Harrison's smile widened, but it no longer reached his eyes. "Indeed it is. I've been trying to reach your family about a very generous offer for their property. Development. Opportunities in that area are quite promising. I'm sure they'll give it all the consideration it deserves. I'm sure they will." Harrison's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath, especially given their current financial situation. Sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as necessities. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Harrison knew exactly who she was, knew about her family's problems, and was making it clear that he understood the dynamics at play. "Shall we head inside?" Ava suggested, gesturing toward the lodge. "I'd like to review the evening schedule." "Of course. Business first?"
As always.
As they walked toward the building, Ava's earpiece crackled with Bradley's voice. Primary, you've got company approaching from the tree line. Single individual, moving carefully. She smoothly positioned herself between Harrison and the potential threat, her hand moving instinctively toward her concealed weapon. Through the trees, she spotted a figure in dark clothing moving toward the lodge's perimeter. "Stay close to me," she told Harrison, guiding him toward the building's entrance. "Problem?" Harrison asked, his earlier smugness replaced by genuine concern. "Probably not, but let's not take chances." Park's voice came through the earpiece. "I've got eyes on the subject. Looks like a photographer with a telephoto lens. Media, not threat." Ava relaxed slightly, but maintained her protective positioning.
False alarm, but good to stay alert.
"Impressive response time," Harrison observed as they entered the lodge. "Very professional. That's what you're paying for." Inside, the retreat proceeded with typical corporate efficiency: cocktails, networking, presentations about quarterly projections, and market expansion. Ava stayed in the background, professional and invisible, while her mind processed the surreal situation she'd found herself in. She was being paid by government contractors to protect the man who was trying to destroy her family using skills she'd sworn never to use again, all to earn money that would ultimately come from the same people she was protecting him from. The irony was so thick she could taste it. During dinner, Harrison made a point of introducing her to the other executives as my new security consultant, and Ava noticed how their reactions revealed the man's character. Some were impressed by his obvious wealth and influence. Others seemed uncomfortable with the implied need for protection. A few looked at Ava with the calculating interest of people wondering if they needed similar services. "Richard's always been paranoid about security," commented Janet Morrison, Harrison's vice president of development. "Ever since that incident with the environmental protesters last year." "What incident?" Ava asked casually. "Oh, nothing serious," Harrison interjected quickly. "Just some tree huggers who got a little too passionate about preserving wetlands that were better suited for residential development." Morrison laughed. "They chained themselves to the construction equipment. Took the police half a day to remove. Them all. Cost us 3 weeks and 50,000 in delays," Harrison added, his jovial mask slipping for a moment. "Some people just don't understand that progress requires sacrifice." Ava filed that information away, noting the barely contained anger in Harrison's voice when he talked about resistance to his projects. After dinner, as the group settled into the lodge's main room for drinks and conversation, Ava's earpiece crackled again. "Primary, we've got movement on the north perimeter," Bradley reported. "Multiple individuals moving with purpose." This time, Ava didn't hesitate. She moved quickly to Harrison's side, speaking quietly in his ear. "We need to move."
"You to a secure location, now." Harrison's face paled.
"What's happening?" "Probably nothing, but I'm not taking chances with your safety." She guided him toward the back of the lodge, away from the large windows that faced the forest. Park met them halfway, her expression tense. 3 individuals? Definitely. "Not media," Park reported. "They're moving toward the building in a coordinated pattern." "Options?" Ava asked. "Safe room in the basement, or extraction to the vehicles." Before Ava could respond, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Around the room, the other retreat participants began to murmur nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ava announced, her voice carrying clearly through the room, "we're experiencing a minor technical difficulty. Please remain calm and stay away from the windows." Harrison gripped her arm. "This isn't a coincidence, is it? The photographer, now this?" "No," Ava admitted, "it's not." Through the earpiece, Bradley's voice was tense. "They're at the building. Professional gear, night vision, coordinated movement. This isn't protesters. This is something else entirely." Ava's mind raced through possibilities. Government contractors had recruited her to protect Harrison. Those same contractors had known about the threats against him, known about his connection to her family, known exactly how to manipulate her into taking this job. The question was, were Chen and Ross protecting Harrison from these attackers, or had they orchestrated this entire situation to test how far Ava would go to honor her contract? Either way, she had a job to do. "Take Harrison to the safe room," she told Park. "I'm going to find out what we're dealing with." "That's not protocol," Park protested. "You stay with the principal." "Protocol just went out the window," Ava replied, checking her weapon. "Keep him safe. I'll handle this." As she moved toward the buildings,
"Entrance," Harrison called after her. "Martinez, remember, your family's future depends on keeping me alive." The threat was clear: protect him or watch everything she'd worked for disappear.
But as Ava stepped into the darkness outside the lodge, she realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't fighting for money or contracts or other people's expectations. She was fighting because it was the right thing to do. And that made all the difference. Ava slipped out through the lodge's service entrance, her eyes adjusting quickly to the darkness. The mountain air was crisp and still, carrying the scent of pine and the distant sound of water moving over rocks. She moved carefully along the building's perimeter, using shadows and architectural features for cover. Her earpiece crackled softly. "Primary, what's your status?" Bradley's voice was barely a whisper. "Moving to contact. Where are they now?" "2 at the front entrance, 1 circling to the back. They've got professional gear, night vision, suppressed weapons, coordinated signals." Ava paused, processing that.
Information. This wasn't some random group of angry protesters or environmental activists.
These were trained operatives, which meant either someone wanted Harrison dead badly enough to hire professionals, or this entire situation was an elaborate test. Given everything she'd learned about Collins, Chen, and Ross, she was starting to suspect the latter. She reached the front corner of the building and peered around carefully. 2 figures in dark, tactical gear were positioned near the main entrance, their movements precise and coordinated. One was setting up what looked like a breaching charge, while the other provided overwatch. Through her earpiece, she heard Park's voice. "Safe room is secure. Harrison is asking questions I can't answer." "Keep him calm," Ava replied. "This will be over soon." She hoped that was true. Moving along the front of the building, Ava positioned herself where she could observe both attackers. Their equipment was expensive, their technique flawless, but something felt off. They were making just enough noise to be detected by competent security, positioning themselves just visibly enough to be spotted by trained eyes. It was either sloppy work by professionals or very careful work by people who wanted to be found. The pieces clicked together as she watched them work. This wasn't an assassination attempt, it was a performance, a live-fire exercise designed to test how she would respond under pressure, how far she would go to protect someone she had every reason to hate. But knowing it was a test didn't make the weapons any less real or the danger any less immediate. The attacker with the breaching charge finished his setup and signaled to his partner. In 30 seconds, they would blow the front entrance and storm the building where a dozen innocent corporate executives were currently huddled in fear. Test or not, Ava couldn't let that happen. She moved. Her approach was silent and swift, using techniques learned in a different life to close the distance before either man could react. The first one never heard her coming, her arm locked around his throat from behind, cutting off his air supply and consciousness in one smooth motion. The second attacker spun toward the sound of his partner's body hitting the ground, but Ava was already inside his guard. A quick strike to the wrist disarmed him, followed by a knee to the solar plexus that dropped him to his knees. "Bradley," she whispered into her earpiece as she zip-tied both unconscious men with restraints from their own gear. "Front entrance is clear. Where's number 3? Lost him when the lights went out. Could be anywhere." Ava checked the breaching charge and found it was real enough to level half the building's front wall. She carefully disarmed it, noting the professional quality of the explosive device. Whoever was funding this operation had serious resources. A sound from inside the building, glass breaking, followed by shouts, told her that the third attacker had found another way in. She moved quickly through the front entrance, now that it was clear, and found chaos in the main room. Tables were overturned, retreat participants were pressed against the far wall, and a figure in tactical gear was advancing toward the basement stairs where Park had taken Harrison.
"Stop!" Ava called out, her weapon drawn and trained on the attacker. The figure turned, and for the first time that night, Ava got a clear look at one of their faces. Mid-30s, professional bearing, with the kind of calm competence that came from years of training.
And he was smiling. "Ms. Martinez," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "Impressive work outside, though I have to say taking both my men alive shows admirable restraint. Who are you? Someone who's very interested in your capabilities." He gestured with his weapon toward the basement stairs. "Shall we go collect Mr. Harrison?" I think it's time everyone understood what's really happening here. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a test of her protective
instincts. It was a demonstration.
Chen and Ross had orchestrated this entire scenario to show Harrison exactly what kind of security services they could provide, using Ava as the star performer in their deadly sales pitch. "You're working for Strategic Protection Services," she said. "Very good, and you've just provided Mr. Harrison with a compelling demonstration of why he needs our ongoing services." The man's smile widened. "The question is, are you going to complete the performance, or do we need to find a more convincing ending?" Through her earpiece, she heard Park's voice. "Primary, we've got a problem down here. Someone's trying to break." Through the safe room door. The third attacker wasn't working alone. There were more of them, and they'd already reached Harrison. "Your move, Ms. Martinez," the man said. "Save your client, and we all walk away with a very lucrative long-term contract. Or hesitate and explain to Chen and Ross why their investment in you didn't pay off." Ava understood the real choice he was offering. Play along with their elaborate charade, and she'd have the money to save her family's dojo, plus a guaranteed
income for years to come. Refuse and watch everything she'd worked for disappear.
But as she looked around the room at the terrified retreat participants, ordinary people caught up in a game they didn't understand, she realized that some things mattered more than money. "You're right," she said, lowering her weapon slightly. "This is about completing the performance." The man's smile broadened, thinking he'd won. "But you misunderstood what kind of performance I'm giving." Ava's shot took him center mass, dropping him before he could react. Around the room, the retreat participants screamed and dove for cover. "Bradley, Park, all attackers are down or neutralized," she spoke into her earpiece as she zip-tied the wounded man. This was a setup. Strategic Protection Services orchestrated this entire operation. "Copy that." Bradley's voice was grim. "What's our play? We protect our clients and get everyone out of here safely. Then we have a very interesting conversation with our employers." As sirens wailed in the distance, real law enforcement responding. To reports of gunfire, Ava helped the shaken retreat participants to safety. Harrison emerged from the basement pale and visibly shaken, his earlier smugness completely gone. "What just happened?" he demanded. "You almost became a victim of the same people who were supposed to protect you," Ava replied. The good news is, you're safe. The bad news is, you're going to need to find a new security company. Harrison stared at her for a long moment. You saved my life? It's what I was hired to do? Even knowing who I am?
Even knowing what I've been trying to do to your family? Ava considered the question as police cars filled the lodge's parking lot. Especially because of that. Some things are bigger than personal grudges. Harrison nodded slowly, something shifting
in his expression. Perhaps we should discuss those development plans when this is all over. I'm thinking the Riverside area might be better suited for preservation rather than development. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. As the authorities took control of the scene, Ava realized that her contract with Strategic Protection Services was effectively over. Chen and Ross would disappear back into whatever shadow organization had spawned them, taking their money and their promises with them. But for the first time in years, she felt like she'd made the right choice, even if it meant starting over, from scratch. 3 weeks later, Ava sat in the morning sunlight streaming through the windows of Martinez Family Dojo, watching her father lead a children's class through basic forms. The familiar sounds, the slap of bare feet on mats, the
sharp calls of yes, sir,
from young voices, the gentle corrections from an instructor who'd spent 30 years teaching discipline through martial arts, filled her with a peace she'd almost forgotten was possible. The dojo was safe. Harrison had been true to his word, calling off the development project and even helping arrange a historical preservation designation that would protect the property in perpetuity. The tax situation had been resolved through what he called community development incentives and what Ava suspected was simply guilt money. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. Saw the news about Strategic Protection Services being shut down by federal investigators. You okay? She typed back. Better than okay. Thanks for checking. The official story was that SPS had been running unauthorized operations using government resources, testing potential recruits through elaborate scenarios that crossed every line between training and entrapment. Chen and Ross had disappeared into the bureaucratic maze that had spawned them, but several of their operatives were facing serious charges. Collins had lost his government contracts and was facing his own investigation, though Ava suspected he'd land on his feet somehow. Men like him always did. Sweetheart? Her father's voice interrupted her thoughts. You've got a visitor? She looked up to see Derek Thompson standing in the doorway, looking uncertain and slightly out of place in
his business clothes.
Derek? What are you doing here? I was in the area for work, he said, stepping carefully around the edge of the children's class. Heard about what happened at that retreat. Wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine. How did you find me? Derek smiled sheepishly. Small world, remember? Plus, Marcus mentioned your family had a dojo. Wasn't hard to track down. They stepped outside onto the front porch, where wooden benches faced the mountains that had sheltered the Martinez family for 3 generations. So what's next for you? Derek asked. Word is Blackwater's shutting down its civilian program after the SPS scandal. Good, Ava said, simply. Maybe that'll force some honest training programs to fill the gap. You could start your own. You've got the skills, the experience, and now the reputation. I heard what you did at that lodge, taking down a whole team of operatives to protect people you barely knew. Ava shook her head. I'm done with that world. For real this time. What about the money? I thought you needed it for this place. We found another way. She gestured toward the dojo where her father was now working one-on-one with a teenage girl who moved with the focused intensity of a serious student. Turns out preservation grants and community support can accomplish what government contracts and real estate deals couldn't. Derek followed her gaze. That's your dad? Robert Martinez, former Special Forces, current keeper of the family legacy. And that's what you're protecting now? The legacy? Among other things. Ava leaned back against the porch railing. You know what I realized during all this? I spent so many years running from what I was good at that I forgot why I got good at
it in the first place, which was to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Somewhere along the way, that got twisted into proving how tough I was, how much I could take, how far I could push myself. But that night at the lodge, when I had to choose between the money and doing what was right.
She paused, remembering the moment of absolute clarity she'd felt. It reminded me who I used to be before I got lost. Derek nodded slowly. So what now? You're just going to teach kids martial arts? Kids, adults, whoever wants to learn. My mum's starting a women's self-defense program next month. Dad's talking about expanding the veterans program. Ava smiled. Turns out there are a lot of ways to protect people that don't involve government contracts or corporate security. Sounds peaceful. It is. She looked at Derek, noting the restless energy that reminded her of her younger self. What about you? Still looking for the next adrenaline rush? Actually, I've been thinking about what you said, about protecting people who can't protect themselves. There's a job opening with the county sheriff's department, not as exciting as private security. But it's honest work. Yeah. Derek stood up, brushing off his pants. Listen, I should get going. Just wanted to make sure you were okay after everything. Derek? She stopped him as he reached the steps. For what it's worth, you were right about Collins. He did set up that fight from the beginning. I figured. Man always did like his games. Derek paused. But you know what? I'm glad he did. If he hadn't, I never would have seen what real skill looks like. Changed my whole perspective on what strength actually means. After he left, Ava went back inside to find her father finishing up with the teenage student. The girl bowed respectfully before gathering her gear, moving with the confident grace that came from years of training. She's good, Ava observed. She is. Reminds me of someone else at that age, stubborn, talented, and absolutely convinced she knows better than her instructors. I was never that bad. Robert Martinez laughed. You were worse. But you figured it out eventually, did I? You're here, aren't you? You're safe, your family's safe, and you chose principle over profit when it mattered most. He put his arm around her shoulders. I'd say you figured it out just fine. That evening, as Ava helped close up the dojo, she found a package waiting by the front door. No return address, just her name written in block letters. Inside was a simple wooden plaque with an inscription, in recognition of exceptional service above and beyond the call of duty. It was signed by every member of Harrison's retreat group, along with a note from Harrison himself, Ms. Martinez. Yadud saved more than my life that night. You reminded me that some things matter more than money or power. The Martinez family dojo will always have a friend in Harrison Industries. With respect and gratitude, RH also in the package was a cashier's check for $50,000, exactly what she would have earned from completing the Blackwater program. Payment for services rendered. The accompanying note read, some debts can't be settled with mere money, but perhaps this is a start. The executives of Harrison Industries. Ava stared at the check for a long moment, then walked over to where her father was organizing equipment for the next day's classes. Dad, how would you feel about expanding the scholarship program? What scholarship program? She handed him the check. The one we're about to start. Robert Martinez looked at the amount and whistled softly. This could help a lot of families. That's the idea. What about you? Don't you want to keep some of it?" Ava looked around the dojo at the photos of students who'd trained here over the decades, the worn mats that had absorbed the sweat and effort of 3 generations, the simple wooden walls that had witnessed countless small victories and quiet transformations. "I've got everything I need," she said. 6 months later, the Martinez family dojo had doubled its enrollment and started a community outreach program that provided free training to at-risk youth and domestic violence survivors. Ava taught advanced classes in the evenings while working as a part-time consultant for legitimate security companies during the day, the kind that protected witnesses and aided law enforcement rather than staging elaborate psychological operations. She never heard from Chen, Ross, or Collins again, though she sometimes wondered if they were out there somewhere, running new games with new recruits who thought they were too smart to be manipulated. On quiet mornings, when she practiced alone, on the mats where she'd first learned to balance strength with discipline, Ava remembered the moment in the lodge when she'd chosen to do the right thing regardless of the cost. It had felt like the most natural decision in the world, even though it had taken her years to find her way back to that kind of clarity. Her father often said that the true purpose of martial arts wasn't to create fighters, but to forge character.
Strong enough to fight for others when the moment demanded it.
Looking back, Ava realized she'd finally understood what he meant, and she'd discovered that sometimes the greatest victory was simply remembering who you were meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.